Hey guys, tonight we step onto a Victorian railway platform where the air tastes faintly of coal dust and cool morning dew, and you can already sense that everyone around you is performing a strangely serene ballet of politeness that feels almost scripted. You drift forward with your hamper knocking lightly against your knee, realizing that, honestly, you probably won't survive this if you bring your modern commuter instincts into a world where even breathing too loudly might count as a minor social crime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push forward along the platform, which gleams with that early morning sheen that Victorian travel writers insisted was character-forming, though no one ever clarified what character exactly was being formed, probably a slightly damp one. The steam engine huffs nearby, releasing slow clouds that curl around your ankles as though welcoming you into an improvised fog-themed spa. And you take careful note of the people already waiting in small, neat clusters. Every group maintains a precise distance, enough to show respect, but not so far apart as to look unfriendly, which is your first clue that this entire day will be a mild workout for your social skills. As you move, you hear the faint chirp of a station master's pocket watch snapping shut. Victorian etiquette manuals often mentioned punctuality as a moral virtue, as if missing a train might reveal deeper flaws in your soul. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. By the 1860s, standardized railway time had reshaped British daily life, pulling local schedules into one synchronized rhythm. You feel it now, the quiet pressure of a society finally agreeing what 9:12 a.m. means. And yet you're also aware of a fringe tidbit. Some rural stations clung to their own time anyway, insisting that London clocks were impertinent guests. Historians still argue whether this stubbornness was charming regional independence or passive-aggressive rebellion disguised as folksy tradition. You adjust your grip on your picnic hamper, pretending to be completely at ease, though secretly the handle is biting into your fingers, and you wonder if Victorian wrists were just engineered differently. Around you, others cradle their own baskets with serene confidence. There's a choreography to it. No sudden movements, no swinging, no clattering. The moment someone dares knock their lid against a bench, 3 elderly passengers swivel toward them with the perfectly unified expression of, "Young man, please don't start the day like that." You step closer to the carriage you believe is yours, though in true Victorian fashion, no sign clearly tells you where you're actually supposed to stand. Instead, you're expected to observe, infer, and gracefully imitate. You watch the cluster of early boarders, the delicate shuffle of skirts kept clean from the platform's coal dust, the way gentlemen hold their hats against the breeze like they're gently subduing frightened birds, and the neat way people avoid eye contact while simultaneously monitoring every micro move you make. It's a calm ritual, though slightly unnerving, like joining a yoga class where everyone else already knows the routine. A gentleman beside you clears his throat. Not loudly, but with the decisiveness of someone about to announce the next step. You brace yourself, but instead of speaking, he simply straightens his gloves and resumes doing nothing at all. You file this away. Victorian silence is rarely empty. It's more like polite punctuation. 3 coughs would be a paragraph break. A single sniff might be an entire critique. You shift your weight, letting the morning coolness seep into your shoes. The platform boards creak softly, and above you a gull screeches with the chaotic enthusiasm of someone who has never had to follow etiquette rules a day in its life. A woman nearby glances upward, frowns gently, then returns to standing with perfect stillness. You decide not to imitate the bird. The railway guard strides past with a lantern, even though daylight makes it unnecessary. His boots leave crisp sounds that echo across the metal rails, each footstep like a promise that the day is about to become structured, orderly, and gently ridiculous. Victorian railway culture adored order. Even leisure, especially leisure, required structure. That's why you're here on this quiet morning, about to embark on a picnic where everyone behaves as though they're auditioning for a play titled Polite humans doing polite things. Someone nearby adjusts the lid of their hamper, revealing a glimpse of starched napkins folded into aggressive triangles. You're both impressed and intimidated. There's a mainstream fact embedded here too. Victorian picnic hampers often included full ceramic dishware because outdoor meals were not excuses to abandon civilization. But you notice something else. The person has wrapped the jam jars in wool socks. A strange choice unless you're familiar with the fringe Victorian belief that wool imbues foods with traveling calmness. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or just a practical way to avoid smashed glass. The engine exhales again, a deep, resonant note that rolls across the platform and nudges you closer to your fellow passengers. A gentle joke drifts across your mind. You've never been herded by steam before, but here you are, politely shuffling like a sheep who read a manners guide. You catch yourself smiling, and for a moment you feel lighter, like the day might be easy after all. You glance at a posted notice board that lists travel advisories written in looping cursive. One line warns passengers not to loiter near open carriage doors, though the doors you see are firmly shut. Another advises that picnickers should refrain from spirited displays of delight, a phrase so vague that you promise yourself to remain emotionally neutral for the next 8 hours. Someone once sighed too loudly over gooseberry tart, and clearly the authorities never recovered. Around you, the subtle buzz of conversation increases. Not loud chatter, just the soft hum of observations, questions, and polite clarifications about whose nephew packed which sandwiches. Every sentence sounds like it's wearing gloves. You listen, absorbing the gentle cadence of a society that believed tone could be as important as meaning. You're tempted to introduce yourself to someone, but Victorian etiquette suggests that new acquaintanceships bloom best when planted with restraint. So you continue to hover, nod, and occasionally blink in a pleasant manner. The train itself seems to watch you now, steam drifting from its chimney like a sigh of approval. You notice the polished brass details gleaming in the early light, each rivet reflecting the morning as though the machine wants you to remember this exact moment, a calm beginning before the jostling journey ahead. You feel a sense of anticipation unfurl in you, soft and steady, like the first page of a long novel. Finally, the guard raises his hand, preparing to signal boarding. Everyone subtly straightens, as though an invisible instructor has called the class to attention. You too adjust your shoulders, tighten your grip on the hamper, and inhale the mixed scents of coal, damp wood, and distant pastries. It's time. You're ready. Or at least you're as ready as someone still unsure how to stand properly on a platform can be. The moment stretches, warm and expectant, and you ease a little closer to the carriage. Steam swirls at your heels like a companion urging you forward. Somewhere down the length of the platform, a child giggles, a bright note that breaks the formality just long enough to remind you this is meant to be a pleasant day, not a test. You lift your chin, breathe in again, and prepare to move with the group when the guard gives the final cue. Your Victorian railway picnic begins here, in this small, hushed pause before the door opens, in the etiquette-coded calm of morning steam and soft manners. And in that suspended moment, you understand, the odd serenity of this ritual isn't an accident. It's a kind of gentle social contract, one that expects you to play along, to enjoy the quiet, to let yourself slow down until even the whistle seems polite. You feel the faint vibration of the platform as luggage is shifted somewhere behind you, a reminder that travel is both communal and mildly chaotic. A porter trots past, balancing 3 hat boxes with the poise of someone who has accepted gravity as a negotiable concept. You consider offering help, but Victorian etiquette warns against interfering with a professional's duties unless you're prepared to be politely scolded. So you let him glide by like a hat-bearing swan. Another plume of steam rises, drifting across your vision in slow motion. For a moment, everything becomes soft shapes, the silhouettes of travelers, the glint of the carriage steps, the rhythmic rocking of someone adjusting their parasol. It's strangely calming, like watching early morning fog settle over a quiet field, except this fog smells faintly of metallic optimism and hot machinery. You catch sight of a couple standing with perfect posture,
their picnic gear arranged symmetrically at their feet. The symmetry is almost intimidating. You wonder whether they practice this at home or simply develop the skill through years of social expectation. One of them lifts a small pocket guide titled Railway Manners for the Civilized Traveler, and you make a mental note that such books genuinely existed, filled with advice on how not to embarrass yourself while boarding, eating, or merely existing near a train. The fringe tidbit, you recall, one guide reportedly advised passengers to avoid excessive eyebrow movements, though no one can quite verify whether that was satire or earnest instruction. Historians still argue whether that line was a joke or simply reflected a society very concerned about unruly facial expressions. You breathe in again, letting the sounds settle. Soft footsteps, gentle chatter.
You ease fully into the carriage foyer, the wooden floor flexing just slightly under your weight, and at once you sense the shift. The way every Victorian traveler instinctively arranges themselves into a semi-formal tableau, as if an invisible etiquette director has just whispered, "Places, everyone." The moment you cross from platform to interior, the choreography begins. You don't need music because the rhythm is written in the rustle of skirts, the tap of boot heels, and the faint jostle of luggage being placed with reverent precision onto racks that look like they were designed to hold dictionaries rather than actual belongings. The first rule of Victorian carriage door choreography: do not hesitate. The second rule: do not rush. You realize instantly that these are mutually exclusive and therefore impossible and therefore very Victorian. You step forward with the deliberate calm of someone entering a room full of judges. Polite ones, yes, but judges nonetheless. The hamper in your hand feels heavier than it did on the platform, as though it has absorbed your mild performance anxiety like a sponge. A gentleman near you clears his throat. It's not a request for you to move faster, but a notification that he has noticed your pace. Victorians had an entire vocabulary of throat clears, and this one means no rush at all, but do try not to ruin everything. You pivot gracefully, or as gracefully as someone balancing a wicker hamper can pivot, and you look down the narrow corridor. There is a queue, of course. This is etiquette-themed travel, of course there is a queue, but it's the softest, most orderly queue you've ever seen. People are spaced evenly, each person angled slightly away from the next to avoid accidental eye contact. It looks less like lining up and more like a diagonally organized prayer circle. As you fold yourself into this slow-moving line, you feel the carriage sway as someone outside tests the couplings. The floor trembles gently, like the train is clearing its throat too, matching the humans for courtesy. A mainstream historical fact slips in. Early Victorian passenger trains often swayed so dramatically that etiquette manuals advised travelers to avoid sudden gestures lest one appear buffeted by invisible forces. You brace your knees slightly, trying not to be buffeted by invisible forces. It's a challenge. The person behind you steps forward, keeping the sacred 3-foot distance, close enough to show unity, far enough to avoid what etiquette books called unwelcome warmth. You breathe in the scent of the carriage, beeswax polish, faint smoke from coal kettles and nearby compartments, and something like lavender mixed with damp wool. It's cozy, but also faintly judgmental. Ahead, at the very end of the corridor, you finally spot the door to your compartment, a polished wooden panel with frosted glass etched in looping floral designs. The Victorians loved ornamentation the way modern people love complaining about Wi-Fi. Even the door handle looks extravagant, a twisting brass vine that feels like it should lead you into Narnia rather than a 6-seat carriage. At last, you reach the threshold. This is where the choreography becomes a full routine. Rule 3: never enter a compartment before first acknowledging every person already inside. Not verbally, heavens no, too forward. Instead, you offer the polite half-smile paired with the micro-nod, the exact expression used by people who've just passed each other in a museum and want to say, "Yes, I acknowledge you exist, and I respect your choice of footwear." You perform the nod, they nod back, perfectly synchronized. Excellent, you're in the dance. The first challenge inside the compartment is spatial.
Victorian trains prioritize charm over ergonomics, so the doorway is narrower than your sense of comfort, and the seats inside are arranged in a face-to-face configuration that guarantees at least one moment of accidental intimacy before the journey ends. You inhale gently, then angle your body sideways, hamper in front, elbow tucked, chin slightly lifted. You have no idea if these movements are correct, but you've seen swans navigate reeds with more confidence, so you model your posture on them. A woman near the window tilts her head, admiring your attempt. You take this as encouragement. Another man glances at the hamper, giving the small nod that Victorian travelers use to say, "Respectable choice of picnic equipment." You have been seen. You have been accepted. The carriage door choreography is working. Now comes the seating ritual. Rule 4. Avoid appearing too eager to claim a particular seat. Even if you desperately want the window, you must act as though all seats are equally thrilling. You offer a small gesture toward the nearest bench, open-palmed, humble, as if you're introducing one sofa to another. Someone murmurs a polite refusal, indicating you should take it. You murmur a polite refusal back. The woman by the window gestures, clearly inviting you to sit opposite her. This is a victory, though you conceal your triumph behind a gentle blink. You settle onto the seat, the cushion sighs beneath you, actual comfort, surprising for a train built roughly around the time indoor plumbing was considered extravagant. You place your hamper at your feet, mindful not to occupy too much floor space, because Rule 5, never let your belongings encroach upon another passenger's serene leg aura. Leg auras, you discover, are sacred territory. Once seated, you become acutely aware of the door, still open behind you. This is your responsibility now, part of the choreography. You shift slightly, extend your arm with cautious certainty, and pull it closed. The brass latch clicks softly, the sound of a job well done. You turn back to your compartment companions, each of whom gives the universally polite nod of "Thank you for performing the closing gesture with competence." A fringe historical tidbit floats into your mind. Some Victorian railways employed professional door closers, young attendants whose only job was ensuring doors were shut safely, especially for anxious upper-class passengers. Historians still argue whether these attendants were genuinely necessary or simply invented to give readers more things to feel superior about. Either way, you're pleased you accomplished the task yourself. The train shifts again, gently, like it's testing your balance. No one reacts. Victorians prided themselves on the ability to remain stoic during sudden movements, even if inside they were screaming. You decide to follow their example, gripping your knee lightly in what you hope is a composed fashion. The compartment hums with quiet civility. Someone coughs politely, another unfolds a newspaper so carefully it sounds like distant wings. The woman opposite you adjusts her shawl, creating a soft breeze that smells faintly of rosewater soap. It's cozy, but also faintly judgmental. But the choreography is not finished. Oh no. Rule 6. The subtle negotiation of ankle space. Victorian compartments forced passengers to sit knee to knee, creating a miniature diplomatic zone in which legs must coexist peacefully. You angle your feet outward, creating a triangle of personal space, and your opposite neighbor matches your gesture perfectly as though this is a duet you've rehearsed. A gentleman to your left subtly shifts his legs inward, giving the universal signal, "I am making room for the newcomer." You nod in acknowledgement, feeling like you've just negotiated a minor treaty. Now that the seating arrangement is harmonized, the final portion of the choreography begins, placing the hamper on the overhead rack. You stand, gripping the wicker with both hands. The carriage sways again. Of course it does. The train has impeccable comedic timing. You lift the hamper with all the elegance you can muster, which is approximately 60% elegance and 40% grim determination. Just as you begin to hoist it upward, the man nearest the rack rises slightly, not to take the hamper, but to offer stabilizing presence. He hovers like a polite lighthouse, ready to prevent disaster, but unwilling to rob you of your dignity. This was common practice. Travelers assisted without assisting, offering the idea of help more than the action. You appreciate it deeply. You slide the hamper into place. It settles with a soft thud. The man nods. You nod. The entire compartment glows with the warm satisfaction of a ritual completed successfully. Another mainstream fact drifts in. Victorian rail compartments often had baggage racks woven from metal netting, strong yet flexible, designed to hold parasols, hats, and the occasional overconfidently packed roast chicken. You look at the rack above you and consider, just for a moment, whether the wicker will hold. It does. You breathe. The door opens again as another pair of travelers enters, and now you are no longer the novice. You are the experienced performer. You observe the newcomers with the subtle authority of someone who has danced this dance and survived. They hesitate in the doorway, unsure whether to step forward or step aside. You feel empathy. You were them 10 minutes ago. You shift your knees slightly inward, offering them room to pass. It's a small gesture, but it carries great significance. They respond with grateful micro-smiles. They attempt the hamper lift. You watch the gentleman in the corner rise subtly, offering the lighthouse roll once more. The ritual repeats like a well-choreographed play. A fringe tidbit flickers in your memory. Some Victorian travelers practiced carriage entry movements at home, using hall chairs and linen baskets, determined not to embarrass themselves in public. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or simply a few extraordinarily anxious individuals who feared doorways the way modern people fear public speaking. The newcomers settle, the door closes, the compartment is complete. 6 passengers arranged in harmonious politeness, like a living diorama of manners. Then the train jolts, a small but sudden lurch as the couplings lock fully into place. Everyone in the compartment lifts their eyebrows exactly the same amount, just enough to acknowledge the motion, not enough to seem alarmed. One woman tucks a loose curl behind her ear with the
You feel the train finally lurch into motion. One long shudder, then a smooth, deliberate pull as the wheels settle into their rhythm. And immediately, the Victoria-era dance of carriage door choreography transitions into the next ritual, hamper-lifting diplomacy. The train hasn't even cleared the station, but already the wicker baskets overhead begin to exert psychological weight, as though each one represented a potential etiquette crisis waiting to unfold. You glance upward at your own hamper, perched neatly on the netted brass rack, and you feel a mild swell of pride. The lift was a success. What, as you soon realize, today's journey requires much more than getting the hamper up. You must eventually bring it down without disturbing anyone's peace, dignity, or shins. The carriage rocks gently as the countryside outside unfurls, brick houses blurring into hedgerows, hedgerows dissolving into open fields. The rhythmic clattering of the wheels merges with the soft chatter of your companions, a near-hypnotic backdrop that makes you feel as though you're floating. But etiquette never sleeps, and neither do Victorian travelers, who seem forever alert to the subtle signals of social propriety. You sense that the moment for hamper diplomacy is approaching. It lurks in the air like a polite ghost wearing a tea-stained shawl. Opposite you, the woman who invited you to sit allows her gaze to drift upward toward the hamper racks. It is not a direct gaze, nor even a pointed one, just the slightest upward flick of the eyes. This is your cue. Victorians were masters of telegraphing needs without ever resorting to the vulgarity of saying them aloud. Her glance is the non-verbal way of expressing, "At the next lull in conversation, dear traveler, we must retrieve provisions." You prepare yourself mentally, even though your modern brain is screaming, "We could just wait." But that is not how this society operates. The timing of hamper retrieval is an unspoken art, a ritual requiring synchronization with the train's sway, the current conversational lull, and the collective readiness of the compartment. The gentleman beside you shifts slightly, uncrossing and recrossing his legs with a soft swish of wool. This is another cue. One passenger signals hunger, another signals readiness, and you, being the caretaker of the hamper immediately above your head, must rise to meet the moment with all the gravity of a minor ceremonial officer. The train rattles over a junction, sending a flutter through the brass lantern above. Everyone pretends not to notice. You place your palms on your knees, inhale, and begin the ascent.
Victorian train compartments were not designed for standing. The ceiling is low, the shoulders of fellow passengers form a polite but significant obstacle course, and the sway of the train adds a layer of difficulty akin to balancing on a moving escalator holding a tray of full teacups. But you rise anyway, moving with controlled grace, exactly like someone trying not to appear as though they are trying too hard. A mainstream fact drifts into your mind. Many Victorian carriages lacked central aisles, requiring passengers to perform vertical maneuvers in tight spaces that would make modern safety inspectors weep. The expectation wasn't convenience, it was poise. And so you summon your poise, bracing one hand lightly against the paneling, reaching up with the other to touch the wicker lid of your hamper. This is when the true diplomacy begins. Hamper Rule 1. Never retrieve a hamper without acknowledging the spatial ripple it will cause. You cast a glance downward, a polite glance, soft and brief, to indicate to the seated passengers that you are about to disturb the air around their heads. A few nod in return, the Victorian version of, "Go ahead, champ." You slide the hamper forward an inch. The train sways. A brief joke flits into your mind. If gravity were a Victorian gentleman, it would definitely be the passive-aggressive type. But you keep your smiles small, because large smiles before lunch are considered improper unless caused by babies or poodles. You grip the hamper with both hands, feeling the wicker warm beneath your palms. One more inch. You pull it toward you. So far, so good. But then disaster strikes, or at least the Victorian equivalent of disaster. The lid, ever so slightly, rattles. Not loudly, not alarmingly, just enough to produce a small clack against the rack. Every head in the compartment lifts 1 millimeter. You freeze. This is it, the moment that tests your worth as a traveler of refined sensibilities. Hamper Rule 2. When a noise occurs, pretend it was the sound of elegance itself. You give the briefest, most refined smile possible, straightening the wicker lid with an air of serene confidence. The passengers lower their gazes again. You have passed the test. With the hamper now in your arms, you make the delicate descent back into your seat. You sit slowly, deliberately, careful not to disturb the shawl of the woman beside you or bump the boots of the gentleman opposite. This entire action takes perhaps 5 seconds, but Victorian etiquette measures time not in seconds, but in dignity. You place the hamper on your lap, hands resting atop it like a guardian of sacred relics. The wicker basket creaks softly, announcing its readiness to be opened. Opening a hamper in a moving Victorian train is not simply a mechanical act, it is theater. Hamper Rule 3. Always open the lid toward yourself, never toward others, so that stray crumbs, surprise sandwiches, or rogue utensils do not lunge outward into the faces of polite society. You lift the lid slowly, revealing a beautifully organized interior. Triangular cloth napkins, starched to near architectural stiffness, line the top layer. Beneath them lie the treasures, a small tin of lemon biscuits, a loaf of crusty bread wrapped in wax paper, a wedge of soft cheese resting in a crocheted sleeve, and a jar of chutney preserved with more effort than some people devote to raising children. A fringe tidbit floats into mind. Some Victorian families believed that chutney kept on long train rides absorbed the essence of travel and therefore tasted different upon return. Historians still argue whether this was pure superstition or simply a poetic way to explain spoilage. To your mild horror, you also find a small bottle of elderflower cordial, sealed with a cork that looks one vigorous jolt away from launching into orbit. Victorian corks were notoriously unpredictable, especially in oscillating environments like rail carriages. But you keep your expression serene. You will not be defeated by pressurized floral beverages. Your companions lean forward slightly, politely, without intruding, showing interest in the proceedings. They are not eager. Eagerness is vulgar. They are merely attentive, as though watching the slow unfurling of a sunrise they claim not to care about, but quietly enjoy. You take the bread first. Bread is neutral, non-threatening, the Switzerland of picnic items. You gently unwrap it, place the wax paper in your lap, and reach for the small folding knife that your modern instincts scream should not be allowed on public transportation. But Victorians lived in a world where safety regulations were more like polite suggestions. A mainstream fact surfaces. Railway meals often involved cutlery sharp enough to perform minor surgery. Somehow, everyone survived. You slice a small, perfectly modest piece of bread. The others nod approvingly. A gentleman murmurs something complimentary about the crumb texture. Another comments on the quality of the flour. They are speaking a dialect of politeness, where every sentence is actually a tiny ritual handshake. You nod back, like someone fluent in this strange but comforting language. Then comes the diplomatic distribution of treats. Hamper Rule 4. Begin offering from the left. Always from the left. No one knows why, but everyone knows that it must be done. You turn to the woman to your left and offer the bread with a calm, poised gesture. She accepts it with a soft, "thank you," the kind that somehow conveys both gratitude and a mild apology for existing. You pass bread around the circle, ensuring equal portions, not too large, not too small. Sharing equally is essential. Victorians feared looking greedy almost as much as looking underdressed. Next is the cheese. Ah, the cheese. Soft cheeses were notoriously dangerous on trains, especially warm trains, especially trains with passengers who considered odor a personal affront. But you unwrap the cheese anyway, praying silently that this wedge has behaved itself and not fermented into a personality of its own. You catch a faint smell, not unpleasant, just assertive. The man to your right inhales sharply, then gives a micro-nod of approval. You exhale. Crisis averted. You slice the cheese, delicately placing portions onto napkins. The rocking of the carriage complicates things, but you maintain perfect composure. A small wobble occurs, your knife nearly slipping, but you recover with such subtlety that only one passenger notices, and she blesses you with the serene kindness of someone who has once nearly dropped an entire Victoria sponge into her own lap. Next you move to the chutney. The jar is heavy and slightly sticky around the rim, a sign, perhaps, of a hurried last-minute packing. You twist the lid.
You steady yourself as the train gives another confident Victorian rattle, the kind that suggests the engineers were absolutely certain the laws of physics were optional at high speeds. The carriage lamps hum with a soft, uneven glow, flickering just enough to remind you that electricity is still a future dream, and that gaslighting, for all its moody charm, was never designed for mid-journey tea ceremonies. Yet this is precisely the moment when polite society expects you to perform the most delicate ritual of all, brewing tea in motion, with elegance, restraint, and, most importantly, without scalding the nearest stranger. Your hand hovers over the polished tin kettle, still warm from the portable spirit burner tucked beneath the seat like a rebellious cousin the family pretends not to know. You've already completed the hamper-lifting diplomacy of earlier, your arms only slightly trembling from the weight of heavy cutlery and jars of jam, labeled in handwriting confident enough to suggest the writer had absolutely no regard for future decipherability. Now comes the next layer of etiquette, pouring tea in a way that demonstrates total composure, even while the train shudders like a cat trying to shake off a rainstorm. You angle your body sideways, bracing one knee discreetly against the wicker seat back, an action recommended by no etiquette manual, but universally practiced after one attempt to pour tea without support. Across from you, a mustached gentleman pretends not to watch you, though his eyebrows, that most expressive Victorian feature, give him away. The teacups,
Delicate porcelain with patterns of tiny violets rattle out their delicate percussion as the train hits a patch of uneven track. You offer a faint smile that says, "Yes, I'm absolutely in control of this boiling liquid ballet. Thank you for noticing." You probably won't survive this, but you press on anyway. As you carefully tilt the kettle, a single ribbon of steam curls upward, warm and fragrant, wrapping the air in a faint aroma of bergamot and coal smoke. The Victorians believed that a fresh cup of tea could soothe nearly anything: bad news, cold mornings, social awkwardness, or the creeping suspicion that your corset may slowly be influencing your major life decisions. A mainstream historical fact notes that railway companies even advertised tea service as part of the refined travel experience, emphasizing that the comforts of home may accompany the passenger, as though nothing said comfort like boiling water sloshing around a moving vehicle. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some enthusiasts in the 1870s insisted that tea tasted objectively better when prepared on trains, claiming the vibration stimulated the leaves. Modern science offers absolutely zero support for this, but it makes you appreciate the optimism required to declare a bumpy ride a culinary enhancement. Historians still argue whether this belief was sincere or simply a polite justification for why someone kept spilling tea and needed a dignified explanation. You managed to fill the first cup without catastrophe, placing it onto the tiny fold-down table that seems designed by someone who had never met gravity. Victorian etiquette dictates that you serve others before yourself, which means your own cup must wait while you hand over steaming porcelain with the serene expression of someone offering Holy Communion. The mustached gentleman accepts his with a bow, so formal it could pass inspection at Buckingham Palace. You pour a second cup, this one for the lady beside you, a lavender-hatted figure who has spent the past 10 minutes pretending to read, though her eyes remain fixed on your kettle like someone observing an impending fireworks display. She thanks you softly, and you notice the subtle way she cradles the cup in both hands, shielding it from the next expected jolt. Victorians had a whole unspoken vocabulary for this. A two-hand cup hold meant uncertainty, while a one-hand hold, pinky unconsciously extended, meant the drinker felt secure in both the stability of the tea and the stability of their social standing. You opt for a two-hand approach as you finally pour your own cup, because no one has ever been secure enough to one-hand hot tea on a train going this fast. Another rumble travels through the carriage, and a cascade of ripples dances across the tea's surface. You inhale the floral steam, letting the warmth wash over you. Something about this moment feels timeless. The gentle clinking of spoons, the rhythmic creak of the carriage joints, the muted conversations drifting like soft fabric folds. You sip carefully, savoring the harmony of bergamot and adrenaline. A light joke slips into your mind. This is essentially Victorian extreme sports, tea edition. Around you, other passengers perform their own tiny tea rituals. A man in a tweed suit sprinkles in sugar with a precision that suggests he once measured gunpowder for a living. A pair of sisters argue quietly about who has the steadier hands, eventually deciding that whoever spills first must surrender their ginger biscuits. Two children share a conspiratorial grin every time the train lurches, delighted by the chaos their parents desperately ignore. You settle back as the warmth spreads through you. For a fleeting moment, time softens. The world becomes the steady pulse of wheels on rails, the soft glow of lamps, and the shared experience of tea made under improbable conditions. The gentleman across from you clears his throat. "Marvelous pour," he says, as though complimenting an Olympic performance. You offer a modest nod, wondering if he realizes how close you came to baptizing his lap with boiling Earl Grey.
But etiquette demands you accept the compliment gracefully, so you murmur a polite "thank you," while mentally thanking the stabilizing power of one very strategically positioned knee brace. As the train curves, the landscape beyond the window unfurls like a watercolor painting. Blurred greens, soft browns, scattered bursts of autumn yellow. The lady in the lavender hat leans slightly to look, and you automatically shift your cup, creating space in a choreography learned not from rules, but from shared human instinct. She whispers, "Lovely, isn't it?" And you nod, though your attention is still half on your tea, half on the angle of the approaching track. A funny realization settles in. Victorian railway picnics weren't really about the food at all. They were about the performance of civility under hilariously challenging circumstances. And today's tea serves as the centerpiece of that performance. It's a reminder that people back then tried very hard to project gentility even when everything around them rattled, jostled, and threatened to stain their nicest gloves. As if on cue, the train hits another bump, and a droplet leaps from your cup like an escaped convict. You catch it with the swift dab of a handkerchief, movement so smooth you could teach a masterclass in crisis management. The lavender-hatted lady nods in admiration, and you think, that's right, years from now, archaeologists will praise this reflex, or at least they should. The rest of the tea time glides forward with a dreamlike rhythm. Conversations rise and fall. Biscuits make their rounds. A distant whistle echoes through the corridor, and the passengers around you collectively brace for the next lurch with expressions ranging from mild amusement to philosophical resignation. Your tea settles at last, the surface glass still for the first time since you poured it. And in that quiet, fleeting second, you discover the truth. Victorian railway etiquette wasn't about perfection. It was about the calm you tried to cultivate while the world clattered around you. A tiny, oddly comforting rebellion against chaos. Your rebellion is warm in your hands. You take another sip, and the journey rattles on.